Hallelujah, purple privilege is weakened. Not gone, just weakened. As discussed in our prior video, there's a lot of inherent strengths in the Chaos domain in Riftbound, just like how blue in Magic the Gathering is historically heavily favored thanks to card drawing being so fundamentally important to how the game works. Chaos's favorable access to both card draw and movement basically makes it a sole domain that touches upon everything actually important in how Riftbound interactions work as well. So you're not going to see much dissent from this channel about the necessity of the bans, even for some of the more surprising and controversial ones like Scrap Heap or Dreaming Tree. Yes, it's true that Dreaming Tree was a critical draw engine for domains that didn't have the same privilege as Chaos, but what's even more true is that Chaos's movement privileges also makes it one of the best self-targeters amongst them anyhow, making that battlefield asymmetrically favored for Chaos anyways. But the quibblings about Riftbound's first ban list isn't what we're focusing on here. The much more interesting question is what adjustments have to be made to our decks before we bring them to our next Nexus Nights and skirmishes. Here's the lowdown, best I figured it out. Draven's obviously the most heavily targeted by the recent changes, not just the bans to the Purple Suite, and not even just the targeted ban on Draven Vanquisher. As clarified by Wright, there are actually lost cases over Draven's leader ability and Draven Audacious now if everything in that battlefield dies. A small tweak to close out an edge case to be sure, but still an important part of the overall effort to shift his dominance downward. All that said, he's not been rendered unplayable. Purple's movement privileges are still considerable. Miracle lists like China's National Open City Challenge have wriggle room in their flash and ride the wind allocations to make up for Fight or Flight's absence, while Detonate and Treasure Trove are adequate substitutes for Called Shot and Scrap Heap. In fact, a case can be argued that resurgence of Davinsley Aurora type decks necessitates both main deck gear hate and power ramping. Draven himself still sees options with Showboat as a late game threat, especially given that a lot of things have to go wrong in sequence to not get him to 8 or 9 might. And ultimately, his absence just isn't important for the mid-range builds like we saw at Shenzhen National Open. He does, however, absolutely hate all of the battlefield bans. Reaver's Row, Dreaming Tree, Obelisk of Power, all of these are common battlefields for Draven's rotation, and only Targon's Peak is left over among his most popularly used choices. However, Zong Warren does not fall far behind in common usage, as any amount of guaranteed draw power is welcomed, while Treasure Hoard helps blunt the cost on those rebukes you'll still be slinging around en masse. There's a case to be made that Aurelia was only lightly impacted by the broader purple nerfs. While Fight or Flight was an important card for its flexibility and cost, decks like 2AM Hydro from Liga Española de Riftbound can wholesale substitute with Flash, and now the top lists, inclusive the Shenzhen Open winner, were reliant on the card draw engines impacted by the bans. They were always more reliant on Stellacorn Herder playing hot potato than anything else. Rather, the main point of pain is from the battlefields, where she was also similarly dependent. The only real survivor is Sunken Tempo, rewarding Aurelia for stacking vertically in the first place. That said, she has a few clear backups. The most common deck lists for Aurelia in the first place were spell reliant as part of her protected carry strategy, making Raven Blue Conservatory a potential, if occasionally awkward, defensive ally. Same with Targon's Peak, guaranteeing her responsive options out of turn. Ezreal, yeah, this won't be pretty. The best performing Ezreal lists were all called shot dependent, especially in combination with stacked deck for deep digs, such as with Allen's gold standard list from Bologna. And truth be told, Ezreal still has options to access a lot of cards all at once. It's just going to be a lot more situational and a lot more open to windows for counteractions. Consult the Past is by no means a perfect fit. The hidden cost is not optional, therefore not subject to Ezreal Prodigy's discounts, and it does require you to keep a unit in place to allow for it in the first place. Not to mention, it lacks the sheer dig depth that Call Shot offered, nor can it be recast with Fizz Trickster. Still, it works just fine with Ravenbloom Student, and changes to stack deck just as readily. The loss of Fight or Flight impacts a lot of Ezreal lists too, though interestingly not Allen's, as he was using retreats to both protect units plus repeat Ezreal's on-play effects, and keep his rune count high. Allen's list also really only loses Obelisk of Power from his battlefield rotation. Control type fields like Sigil of the Storm and Void Gate to amp up Wages of Pain and Arcane Shift are unaffected, and battlefields like Targon's Peak and Raven Blue Conservatory still plays to the deck's overall strategic direction. The 10-ton elephant in the room is that Bologna also clearly demonstrated that Aurora decks are looking around for the chance to sneak back in. And the drastically reduced consistency of Miracle decks means that they have a much better chance now at sticking the landing on those Mind Splitters and Volibears. Not to mention huge buffs coming from Unleashed, which we'll get to speculating on in the follow-up video. Now, the good news is that the most common flavors of Dazzling Aurora this meta were badly wounded by the same bad-sitting Draven. As impressive as Sabik's deck was in Bologna, it was still reliant upon the Miracle Shell to have his cake and eat it too. It was, in effect, a Chaos Control deck with an Aurora win condition, using Rebukes, Hard Bargains, and Fight or Flight to control the mid-game. For obvious reasons, this isn't going to work anymore, or at least not as well. Instead, Sabik's list reverts to an Origins era strategy, utilizing Treasure Trove and Pack of Wonders as part of its ramp and draw strategy, and replaces Obelisk of Power with Forgotten Monument to help further delay the game out for its power spike. Now, if you're not playing purple, you're still feeling the pain thanks to Battlefield bans. Reaver's Row was a welcome tool for assault-based strategies, and while Emperor's Dais does allow you to recover tools, it also leaves you vulnerable to fight-based triggers like Draven's. Card draw engines are also impacted, with the next best options being Zon Warrens for general universal access, Sunken Temple for beefier swingers, and Candlelit Sanctum not so much to stock up your hand, but to at least control the odds of drawing into the right responses. It is basically a must-have for bait hook and Rek'Sai strats anyhow. But there is the unspoken side effect of the Battlefield bans: much more diverse strategic approaches. Decks like Aurelia now get to more seriously consider their treasure hoard for power management, and the expected resurgence of Aurora-centric strategies means that Forgotten Monument is a very serious threat to aggro decks looking to beat the clock before they go off. Furthermore, while I'm not convinced that Draven Aurelia will somehow stop being relevant, Order decks are soft buffed with access to salvage and might agnostic kill spells to keep competitive against Aurora types. Azir in particular benefits substantially from the decreased consistency of Chaos decks, was never reliant on the impacted battlefields, is in the best colors to crush Aurora as it pops up. Fiora 2 is looking like a contender. Pit Rookie, Warmonk's Armor, and Monastery of Hirana gives it a card advantage battlefield that is effectively blank for everybody else, and access to cards like Ruin Runner and Akshan to complement Sabotage and Salvage can make for very directly tailored game 2s and 3s as its core strategy. Of course, keep in mind that you only get to enjoy the Spiritforge 1.5 meta for about a month and change. Next time, let's talk Unleashed.